Hello everyone, good morning. Just bear with me while I get myself sorted out here. How's everyone doing this morning? And how's your week been going so far? For those of you who are joining us today, do say hi, leave me a message in the comment section so that I know who's tuning in and I can say hi to you guys. Just bear with me 1 second to get set up before we get started properly. See if Facebook's working today. Excellent. Okay, it's working. All right. Yeah, so how's everyone doing today? What have you guys been up to this week? We've had a lot of things going on in Kechara Forest Retreat this week. I think if you guys are following Rinpoche's Facebook fan page, and if you're not, you should follow it immediately. But if you guys are following Rinpoche's Facebook fan page, or even this fan page, you will have seen that on Friday we took delivery. We received Rinpoche's indoor relic stupa. The structure has actually arrived ahead of time as well, and it came very smoothly. Arrived, I think, something like a week ahead of schedule or something. So it's a very good sign. What Changzula, what Bingui shared with us, was that it's a good sign that Rinpoche's incarnation will be back with us soon. So that happened on Friday, and then since then we've been, hosting many volunteers to help us to prepare for the stupa, to prepare the items that are going into the stupa. So yeah, that's been taking place since Friday. That's like the most exciting news that we've had this week. Also, let me think what else. I think an announcement was made late last night, that a new Facebook group has been set up to post more regular updates about the stupa. Okay. Oh, good morning. Good morning, Bradley. Oh, 36 degrees Celsius. That's horrible. Sounds muggy. Toshidele Chodatla Devo Yimbe. Hi, Albert. Thank you for joining us this morning. Good morning, Jillian. Thank you for joining us this morning. There's a new Facebook group that's been set up, and this group is to post more regular updates on the stupa so that we don't clog up the fan pages, and have things pushed down. So one of the things that we'll be doing as part of this new Facebook group and the updates on the stupa is that we will be also live streaming events related to the stupa, starting with today, which will be the Sumrup puja, which will be at 7 p.m. Malaysian time. The puja itself will be at 7 p.m. Malaysian time, but the live streaming will start at 6 p.m. Malaysian time, so GMT plus 8. And there'll be an English host, a Chinese host, and we will be showing you guys some of the items that will be going into the indoor relic stupa. So some of the holy items that will be going inside, some of the mantras that will be going inside, some of the images and so on, as well as the sokching, which is the life stick that runs through the center of the stupa. So the host, it will be a Zoom call. The live stream will be a Zoom call. So limited spaces. So if you are interested, please set your alarms so that you can hop onto the call and the spaces are not taken up. But it will be a Zoom call, and we will show you guys exactly what's happening. And the Sunrup puja that will be held today will be to bless and consecrate all the items that will be going inside. All right, so that's happening today. And then, as you guys will probably have figured out, we had our first Pets Day out yesterday here at Kechara Forest Retreat. Good morning, Sukpan. So yeah, we had our first Pets Day out here at KFR yesterday, and that was a lot of fun. We had 30 to 40 dogs and a few cats that came up from KL and also from Bentong and all that. And so the fur babies and their owners got the chance to roam around KFR and to circumambulate and visit all the holy sites. And then they got to do a pet's blessing. They got to receive a pet's blessing. So that was a lot of fun. So if you guys have a fur baby and you're interested in attending the next Pets Day out, keep your eyes peeled, because we got a lot of useful feedback yesterday about how we can make the environment and the event more conducive for pets. So we will be implementing that on our next Pets Day out, right? And hopefully this time we will be able to take in bigger dogs, bigger animals. Yesterday's event was dogs and cats 16 inches and below. Hopefully in our next one we'll be able to take larger animals. All right, so I'm just waiting for a couple of moments before we get started for more people to join us. Last thing related to the indoor relic stupa is if you would like to get involved with it, in a sense, you're not able to actually come here and volunteer. You have a couple of options. One is that we're still looking for sponsorship for many of the items related to the Relic Stupa project in general. And the second thing is that we are accepting submissions of coins and notes so that they can be placed inside the stupa. You can add your energy essentially to the stupa, and the submissions for those items ends on the 27th of August. All right, so if you guys are interested in doing that, please do send in your items as soon as possible. If you're living abroad like Bradley, you can still send in things. Just make sure that you send it in by courier so that it gets here on time, because it's like 11 days left, right? And if you guys need more details, please leave me a comment in the next to the live stream or just below the live stream, and then I will reply as soon as the live stream's over. All right, so before we get started, good morning, Rina. Thank you for joining us this morning. So yeah, before we get started today, on today's topic, do a short prayer to ascribe the source of the information that's going to be shared today. I go for refuge in my Lama, from whom I've received these teachings. I go for refuge in the lineage Lamas, from whom my Lama has received these teachings. All right. So yes, thank you very much for joining me this morning. Last week I spoke about laziness, and I talked about the 3 different types of lazinesses that the Buddha taught. So the laziness of effort and so on. And then I talked about how Rinpoche would use different methods in his training of his students to counter these forms of lazinesses, and how laziness can be damaging to our spiritual and to our secular success, and some of the methods that we can use to overcome laziness. And I also spoke about focusing on the benefits of doing something to help us to overcome laziness, or focusing on the fact that we will enjoy the results of doing something, and that will help us to get over that momentary, laziness, and about taking things one day at a time or one moment at a time, if that helps us. So just because we skipped something or just because we failed at something does not mean that we have to skip and fail forever. So that was last week's talk, which incidentally also ties in with what I mentioned in the previous week's talk about diligence and enthusiasm. All right, so again, if you guys have any special requests for a particular topic to be covered or a particular question to be answered, please let me know, and I'll get that done in a future video. But before I get into things today, just wanted to let you guys know, and also to express our thanks and gratitude to the sponsor of today's talk, Chandra Gole, with the dedication, may the Dhamma flourish, and may spiritual practitioners gain attainments, and may Kechara flourish. Thank you very much, Chandra. And to a anonymous sponsor of today's talk, who did not wish to be named, but wished to dedicate it to this talk, wish to dedicate it and say thank you for having this talk at this particular time of the day, as it's very auspicious for me. So thank you very much to an anonymous donor for making this talk possible. All right. So thank you guys so much again. If you would like to sponsor a talk, there is a link in the description section of this video, and please click on it, because your support does help us to continue making these online programs available. Thank you for joining us this morning, Iman. All right, so today's talk, obstacles. And what are obstacles? So obstacles, I don't think I need to go into too much detail, right? But obstacles are anything that prevents us from achieving a desired goal. So in a secular environment, an obstacle might be something like someone's promoted over us. An obstacle may be us not getting a famous tuition teacher that we want for our children. An obstacle may be the internet cutting off during an important Zoom or Skype call. So like a colleague being promoted over us so that we don't get the salary boost that we needed in order to buy a new house, for example. In a spiritual environment, an obstacle may be things like laziness. It may be things like mental wandering, agitation, indecisiveness. inability to focus, having our minds always being distracted here and there, never being settled mentally, anger, frustration, having mood swings, so our mood's always going up and down, having doubts, or one of the worst obstacles for us to have, in fact, the worst obstacle to have, is us developing wrong view of our teacher, because our teacher being the foundation of all good things, all attainments. If we have wrong view of our teacher and the source of the attainments that we may possibly accomplish, if we have wrong view of that, it becomes very hard for us to develop spiritually. All right, so those are just some examples of spiritual as well as secular obstacles that we might experience in our day-to-day life. Now, are obstacles what we think they are, right? So most of us, when we hear the word obstacle, we think of something that's, for me at least, I think of an obstacle course. So something that's dirty, something that's unpleasant, something that's very muddy, something that's a lot of work, something that involves a lot of struggle and so on. So for most of us, we think of obstacles as something that's very unpleasant and something that's very, very physically, physically difficult. And we're trained to think of obstacles as something that has the outward appearance of being something that's very unpleasant. Now, does an obstacle always have to present itself as something unpleasant? And the answer to that is no, not necessarily. Obstacles can be something that's very, very easy and something that appears to be very pleasant to us. So, for example, an obstacle can be an attitude. And as an example of an attitude being an obstacle, laziness is one such attitude. So, for example, laziness to do virtuous things, but enthusiasm to do non-virtuous things. So, in our case, I say our because all of us experience this. It's not just, you don't always feel like it's just you who's experiencing it. Because if you talk to more and more people, you also realize that plenty of people experience these obstacles. So, I hope that makes you feel better about, you not being alone in trying to overcome it. But as an example of laziness being an obstacle, laziness to do virtuous things and enthusiasm to do non-virtuous things, for example, it's laziness to do our sadhana, so our daily meditation prayers. So being unable to wake up early, or being too lazy to get out of bed early to do our sadhana, or being very, very tired at the end of the day and not being able to push ourselves to do our sadhana at the end of the day. But think about it, if we are presented with the opportunity to perhaps go out and have a drink with some friends late at night, even though you're tired, more often than not, we will find the motivation to do so. So in Malaysia, we call that yam cha. So we may often find ourselves in situations where we feel very lazy to do our sadhana, but we will feel very enthusiastic about going out to yam cha with our friends. We may find that we are very lazy to drive to a Dharma center, to volunteer, to help out, or to circumambulate, to go on pilgrimage, but we have the energy and the enthusiasm to go food hunting, which is a very typical Malaysian thing to do, and I confess that I have been guilty of that as well before. Another example is on a grander scale, on a higher scale, is being lazy to pursue Dharma attainments. So being lazy to do retreats, being lazy to be close with our teacher because we know that our teacher will put us to work. Being, again, lazy to volunteer, lazy to make meditation a daily part of our life. So being lazy to pursue Dharma attainments, but having the ambition and being extremely enthusiastic and very, very driven to have work promotions, to be promoted at work. So, we can see that laziness can present itself as an obstacle to us. Why is it an obstacle? Because it's pleasant. I mean, for the most part, it is pleasant, right? When you are enthusiastic to pursue non-virtuous things, because we appear to be amiable, we appear to be very sociable, we appear to be someone who has a lot of friends, someone who has a lot of social engagements and so on, and we appear to be very popular. So laziness in that way, laziness to pursue something that's virtuous and enthusiastic to pursue something that's non-virtuous, can be pleasant in the way that, it makes us appear like someone's very popular. And it's fun. I mean, I admit it's fun going out and it's fun hanging out with your friends and so on and pursuing all of these things that we think will bring us happiness. But ultimately, we need to think, what does it lead us to? And how it becomes an obstacle for us is, it becomes an obstacle for us to our deeper spiritual practice. All right. Another example of how an obstacle may arise as an attitude is, for example, jealousy. So when we have feelings of jealousy arise all the time and we do nothing to counter it, thoughts such as, that person puts in so little effort, but yet they get so much praise, thoughts like that will start to arise. If you have siblings and you think back to your childhood, thoughts such as, my siblings never get scolded, I'm always the one getting blamed, even though they're so bad. And I'm always trying and I'm always the one getting into trouble. So what's the point of trying to be good? So thoughts like that may arise as well. That's us when we're young, but when we get older and we have feelings of jealousy that we don't attempt to counter, it can cause us to abandon our practice. Because, for example, why is it that person who only appears to meditate 10 minutes a day seem to move so far ahead in their practice? Why is it that person who is always misbehaving, but everybody seems to like them so much? Why is it that person who's backstabbing, who is conniving, who's manipulative and so on, seem to progress ahead in work so quickly? And when you see that and when you experience jealousy as a result of that, it can cause us to abandon practice. What practice? The practice of thinking that actually it's easier. It's easier to be conniving, it's easier to be manipulative, it's easier to play politics at work just so that we can get ahead. It's harder to remain kind, it's harder to remain honest, it's harder to remain with integrity because the results don't appear to be as pleasant because we're not promoted as quickly, for example. All right, so jealousy in that way can become an obstacle as an attitude. Another attitude, another reaction that can be an obstacle to us is, for example, anger. All right, so how anger can appear to be easier is because, for example, if you don't attempt to counter anger, obstacles, it can manifest. Oh, this is perfect actually, because I have personal experience of this. It can manifest during retreats. So how, you might think, okay, in a retreat, you're sitting down and you're just chanting and you're just reciting your mantras. How is it possible that anger can arise as an obstacle? I promise you, 100%, it's completely possible. Because when I was a kid and I did a Doji Shukden retreat with my siblings, for some reason, throughout the entire retreat, I was so irritable. And you'd be thinking, there's 3 people sitting in a room, all you're doing is reciting Om Benza Wiki Bitana Soha. What could there possibly be that's happening that could irritate me? But somehow, for some reason, I found a reason to be irritated. And it was an obstacle because you're trying to meditate and you're trying to visualize. And all this time, you are completely consumed and distracted by this feeling of irritation and this feeling of anger and being ready to burst at any time. So, anger, when it's not countered, anger, when it's not dealt with, can grow. And anger is something that can develop into a habit in the sense that it becomes something that's a preferred reaction for us. It becomes easier for us to react in anger. And so we can direct this anger towards our friends, to our family, and then once it grows, I have seen this before, anger can even grow to become something that we unfortunately direct towards our guru. All right, so how it can become an obstacle from something that's very quote-unquote minor and habitual is that when it grows to something that it gets to a stage where you can actually direct anger at your lama, that it can cause us to go away from our teacher. And so that becomes an obstacle to our spiritual practice. All right, anger, oh gosh, so many people suddenly joined. Good morning, Amy. Thank you for joining us this morning. Hook Peng, Tashi Dele Jampela. Good morning, Kanun. And good morning, Jerry. Thank you for joining us this morning. And good morning, Penny. Thank you for joining us this morning. All right, so an obstacle can present itself as an attitude. So I've given you the examples of laziness, jealousy, and anger. Obstacles can also present itself, whether you like it or not, obstacles can also present itself as wealth. So we tend to think of obstacles as being poor. So we tend to think of obstacles as us not having the financial means or financial resources. And we think of being impoverished as an obstacle and not having the financial means to do anything. Now, yes, what Rinpoche explained is yes, being poor can be an obstacle, because if we are so poor to the point where we don't have the mental energy or the mental capacity to even consider other things, to even consider spiritual practice, then yes, being poor can be an obstacle. However, Rinpoche explained that wealth can also be an obstacle too. Oh gosh, I can't tell. Guys, let me know if there are technical problems, because I keep seeing the feed sort of pausing. All right, so do let me know if you guys are able to hear me. All right. But yeah, obstacles can also an obstacle can also present itself as wealth. Why can wealth be an obstacle? Wealth can also be an obstacle because wealth can present itself as a distraction from deeper spiritual practice, or from us pursuing deeper spiritual practice. All right, so wealth gives us the financial capacity or the financial means to pursue all of the things that we desire, all of the things that we've been nurtured by our environment and by society to desire. So sometimes having too much money can also be an obstacle to spiritual practice. So what Rinpoche explained, what the Lamrim explains, is that our human life is a very, very precious one. Why? Because in our human life, in our optimal human rebirth, we don't experience an extreme in terms of suffering and in terms of self-mortification. At the same time, we also don't experience an extreme in self-indulgence and in having the financial capacity to pursue all of the things that we desire. So most of us tread this very fine line between self-mortification and self-indulgence. And in that sweet spot, we can actually practice, because we are in a position to see and to observe and to understand how immense financial means can be an obstacle to spiritual practice. At the same time, we can also observe and see how extreme poverty can also be an obstacle to deeper spiritual practice. All right. The example that's always used is the example of the God realms versus the example of the hell realms. So in the God realms, it's an extremely pleasurable environment where all of your sensory pleasures are fulfilled. All of your senses are fulfilled and you experience extreme sensory pleasure. In that environment, the gods are, in so much luxury and basically in sensory utopia that they don't think about sitting down and doing retreats. They don't think about the fact that their existence, the karma for their existence, may end at any time, and they may take rebirth elsewhere. At the same time, if you take rebirth, in the hell realms, you experience so much physical suffering that you don't even think about the causes of your suffering. You don't think about how to tread the path to extinguish the causes of your suffering. You don't think about any of that. You don't think about doing retreats. You don't think about doing meditations. You don't think about doing a sadhana. All you think about is, when is this pain ever going to end? Right? So in a human rebirth, we have an opportunity to observe how self-mortification will not be beneficial to our spiritual practice, as well as self-indulgence. And so that's how wealth can actually become an obstacle to our spiritual practice, is that, or rather wealth can become an obstacle, to our spiritual practice, is because it forms a distraction. And I have seen for myself, people who, when things are not going so well, will come to the Dharma Center. Excuse me. When things are not going so well, they'll come to the Dharma Center and they'll ask for help. But the second things, start to become a little better financially, you start to see them a little less. And you start to hear them say things like, oh, my company is so busy now, work is so busy now, so I can't come as much. Shareholders, I have my commitment to my shareholders. I need to fulfill my commitment to the shareholders, so I can't come as often. We are pursuing this project. We are going after this initiative, and so on. So as wealth grows, wealth can end up becoming an obstacle to our spiritual practice, all right? Now, another obstacle that's pleasurable is an obstacle that's pleasurable, it can present itself as a beautiful boy or a beautiful girl. So outwardly, it's very pleasurable because it's something nice to see, something nice to experience. But yes, it can also become a distraction for us. So some people will pray for a partner, and then they meet the partner. So they think that not having a partner is an obstacle, and so they pray for this obstacle to be removed, and then they get the partner. And they fall madly and deeply in love with the partner, and they do everything that they can to maintain their relationship with their partner. So that means going to the gym, that means buying nice clothes, that means spending all of our time with our partner, that means talking to our partner, it means taking them out and maintaining the relationship with the partner. And not just taking them out and maintaining the relationship, it means being interesting, being charming, being funny, being witty, being entertaining. And if you get into fights with your partner, it means, taking time out to pacify them and making sure that they're okay. And then the relationship might lead to kids. And so that leads to more distractions, that leads to more time away from our practice, because then we need to get a better job to provide for our children. We need to get a bigger house to provide for our children. We need to upgrade our car to fit more kids into the car. And so a lot of energy is put towards something like that. And at the end of our lives, it may not necessarily bear spiritual fruit. Now, I'm not saying don't look for a relationship, because that's not for everyone. Some people, it might actually benefit them to be in a relationship, because for some people, loneliness may be an obstacle for their spiritual practice, because loneliness becomes so distracting that they're not able to focus on the spiritual practice. For other people, being in a relationship becomes a distraction to their spiritual practice. And it's very rare that we actually meet partners who enhance our spiritual practice, who are not just supportive, but actually will practice together and ascend, like Gantapa and his consort. All right, so having a partner can be an obstacle. Likewise, not having a partner can be an obstacle. All right. Another obstacle that may present itself to be very pleasurable is a job promotion. So we may think that being stuck in the same position in the company for a long time is an obstacle. We may pray for a job promotion. However, a job promotion may also be an obstacle. Why? Because a promotion at work may lead to more traveling. It may lead to longer hours being spent at work. It may put thoughts into our mind about upgrading our lifestyle, because now we have the financial capacity to do so, and we need to do something to help our lifestyle match our new status at work and so on. So then that can lead to more financial commitments that we need to fulfill. So promotion at work, as pleasurable as it may seem, because that's something that we really want, may not necessarily be a positive or beneficial thing to our spiritual practice. It may actually be an obstacle as well. All right. Now, at this point, you may be thinking, well, if that's the case, then are all worldly pursuits an obstacle? Is a partner an obstacle? Is a new job an obstacle? Is promotion at work an obstacle? Is pursuing money an obstacle? And is this talk that Pastor Gina is now giving us so depressing, because everything in my life is an obstacle? All right. From a scriptural perspective, from a ultimate point of view, truthfully, I'm going to be very brutally honest with you guys. Worldly pursuits are an obstacle. Worldly pursuits are an obstacle. That's the truth. All right. But does this mean that all of us should abandon our worldly pursuits? Does this mean that now that we have kids, we look at our kids and go, well, you're an obstacle, so see ya? Does it mean that, since we just got a job promotion at work, bye, tell your boss I don't want it? All right. Does it mean that we should get rid of all these things, get rid of our kids? No. All right. Whilst worldly pursuits may be are an obstacle, it does not mean that we necessarily get rid of everything, because we're not at a stage where we can abandon all worldly pursuits. I'll give you an example. 20 years ago, my father requested Rinpoche to be a monk. And you would think that when someone requests to be a monk, that Rinpoche would immediately accept their request. And Rinpoche actually said no. Why did Rinpoche say no? Rinpoche said, because you have 3 children who need you. and you can't, it would be irresponsible of you as a father to say, bye, dust your hands of them, go off to the monastery and leave your children to fend for themselves. They're not in a stage yet where they're not in a position yet where they're able to do that. So if you want to be a monk in the future, that's up to you, but not right now, because it would be irresponsible of you to wash your hands or to abandon the commitments that you've already made. All right. So whilst worldly pursuits or worldly results are an obstacle, we are not at a stage where we can abandon all of them or we can neglect them. Neglect would be a better word, right? So some people can become monks and nuns immediately, and they can instantly renounce everything that's around them. But many of us have obligations, or many of us have commitments that we already made a long time before we met the Dharma. And it would be irresponsible of us to just abandon it and to neglect it and to not fulfill it. And it would be unkind of us to, quote unquote, dump it on someone else to deal with. All right? So let me just quickly see if we have any questions. Let's see. All right. Oh, that's a very nice song by Milarepa that Bradley shared. I encourage everyone to read it. All right. So now we get to the meat of the talk, right? So if everything around us is an obstacle, or everything around us could potentially be an obstacle rather, how do we counter, how do we deal with obstacles? Now, I had a really interesting conversation yesterday with someone because he explores different speakers, different teachers, different thinkers, and he looks at their knowledge and he looks at the information that they have to share. And one of the things that he brought up yesterday was, which is funny enough, I put my notes, was that he said that he met a speaker who never uses the word challenge or who never uses the word obstacle. The word that this speaker uses is stretch. All right, so that is the first point I want to raise or to share about how we can counter obstacles is actually adjusting our attitude. Something becomes an obstacle depending on our attitude. And I've brought this up in previous weeks briefly about how our attitude towards events is very, very important because it influences our reaction. How come some people find certain things challenging or certain things difficult, but other people don't? And it could be the exact same event or the exact same incident. What makes a difference is not the actual incident, because the actual incident itself is exactly the same. So person A and person B approaching the same incident could have entirely different reactions. Person A could start to panic, could start to feel very anxious, could start to feel very frustrated because that incident to them is an insurmountable, seemingly insurmountable obstacle, whereas person B approaches it very differently. All right, so what makes a difference is not the actual incident, but the person who is involved. And that is dependent definitely on experience, definitely on practice, but also a person's attitude. So for example, when we face an obstacle in business, think about how we would deal with it compared to how someone like Jack Ma would deal with it. That's an example that Rinpoche really like to use very often. How would someone like Jack Ma deal with an obstacle in business, whether it's financial, whether it's human resources and so on, compared to how we would deal with it? The difference between somebody like Jack Ma, someone like Steve Jobs and so on, is their attitude compared to ours. So for example, if I were to face an obstacle in accounting because I suck at maths, my attitude towards an obstacle in accounting would be very, very different to somebody who has years and years and years of experience and practice in accounting, and that would actually inform their attitude towards it. Another example of how our attitude may change our approach or how we deal with something being an obstacle or not is in wealth. So wealth approached by different people will have different results. So for example, how is it that some people, when they are given great wealth, use it as an opportunity to actually do more. So the more money that they get, the more charitable and more philanthropic they become. Excuse me. How is it that the more money that they get, the more they donate to worthwhile causes, the more that they offer up to their center or they offer up to their guru? And how is it that some people, the more money that they get, the more distracted they become, the less you see of them, the more hedonistic, for example, they become. So wealth in itself doesn't change, but how we approach it and our attitude towards it is what makes the difference. As an example of physical obstacles, how physical obstacles can be dealt with differently, or physical incidents rather can be approached differently, either as an obstacle or not. I gave you guys the example of Sawa Putok Rinpoche, I think 3 weeks ago. So Sawa Putok Rinpoche, if you guys are not familiar, was a Rinpoche who, he's passed away already, but he was a Rinpoche who lived in Tibet and experienced the Cultural Revolution in Tibet and the events of 1959. And as a result of his rank and his status, he was actually imprisoned for 20 years. And as a result of his rank and his status, he was assigned the worst jobs in the prison camp, and that was cleaning the latrines and cleaning the toilets that all of the prisoners used. And if he was ever caught doing his pujas or doing his sadhanas or doing his meditations, even just moving his mouth, in prayer, he will be beaten and he will be tortured, he will be shot with catapults and so on. So most of us in that situation would think of it as a huge obstacle to our spiritual practice, right? We would think thoughts of giving up our sadhana would immediately come to our mind, because is it worth it putting up with all of these things just to do our sadhana? Sawa Putok Rinpoche's attitude was very, very different, because he understood the benefits of the Dharma. Sawa Putok Rinpoche's reaction instead was to learn how to do his sadhana without being caught, without even moving his mouth, so that he would never get caught, he would never be reported on. And his reaction was to meditate on the physical sufferings that he was experiencing, and visualize that he was absorbing all of the obstacles and the karma of Gandin, Sera and Drikpung in order for them to be reestablished successfully in exile. His reaction was to meditate and to visualize absorbing all of the obstacles that His Holiness the Dalai Lama would face in exile, so that His Holiness the Dalai Lama's work would be successful. So that was Sawa Putok Rinpoche's attitude and approach towards the great physical obstacles and sufferings that he was experiencing. Whereas most of us would just think, well, I don't really want to be tortured for doing my sadhana. Maybe I'm just going to postpone it for a while. All right, we'll give up. So how our attitude is very, very important for us in dealing with an incident or an event as an obstacle or not. And connected to that is what I raised earlier, which is reframing our language. So thinking of things as, instead of things being a challenge or instead of things being an obstacle, think of things as stretching. And the reason why I like stretching, which is a little, I know it sounds a little, I guess, California, but the reason why I like the word stretching is because it implies that it's just something that's just a little bit beyond our current capacity, a little bit beyond our current ability to do something. It's there. We need to stretch a little further and make something possible. All right. So that's why I like the word stretch. But what I want to say is adjusting our attitude, reframing our language is very, very helpful in us approaching something as an obstacle or not. And when you approach something as not an obstacle, immediately, mentally, our attitude is that difficult event in front of us, the difficult situation we're facing in front of us becomes something that's more manageable and something that's easier to deal with. All right. Now, how do we inform our attitude? So since I'm talking about adjusting our attitude, since I'm talking about reframing our language, how do we adjust it? How do we do that? What Rinpoche shared with us was the way to adjust our attitude, or the way to inform our attitude, is to always study and to learn, to never stop studying and to never stop learning. All right. Why? Because when we have a deeper understanding of something, it becomes easier for us to adjust our attitude in the right direction. Why? Because you know what direction to go in. You know, and you have more information about why and how you should adjust your attitude. When you have more knowledge, your practice also becomes more stable, and obstacles that arise don't distract or don't divert you. So, for example, when you know more, and when you know the causes of wealth, for example, when you know the causes of suffering, when you know the causes of pleasure, when you know the causes of happiness, when things happen to you, they don't become obstacles to, they don't become distractions to you, and they don't divert you from your spiritual practice. So when you get great wealth, if you know a lot of Dharma already, you can think, okay, well, the wealth is temporary. So instead of using it to deepen our samsara, we can use the wealth to do something that's beneficial and something that's virtuous instead. So then that wealth doesn't become an obstacle to our spiritual practice, all right? Connected to that is the importance of exposure. Exposure to different knowledge and different sources of information, which is something that Rinpoche always did with us. Rinpoche always exposes us to different sources of knowledge and information so that we understand something from different angles. And it's not just to, it wasn't just for Rinpoche to convince us of something, but it was Rinpoche showing us how the Buddha's teachings remain relevant in the 21st century, and how science backs up the Buddha's teachings, and science is continually backing up the Buddha's teachings. And when I say it remains relevant, what I mean is it's always been relevant. That whatever it is that the Buddha taught, thousands of years ago and now are exactly the same, because the mind hasn't changed. And that's what the Buddha was teaching on, was the workings of the mind, the mechanics of the mind, and the mechanics of karma. All right. So Rinpoche would often expose us to different sources of information to show us that there's a different way of presenting information, there's a different way of presenting knowledge, and that when knowledge is universal and it's the truth, that it applies and it's timeless regardless of situation. All right. And it was a way of Rinpoche showing us how we can convey that knowledge to other people. So one of the instructions that Rinpoche gave us was that every single month we should watch a documentary called The Magic of the Unconscious Mind. And in this video, which you can find on YouTube, they talk, for example, about perception, and they talk about memory. And those are two topics that are dealt with in Buddhism, if you guys are familiar. So in this video, they talk about how we perceive the world around us and how everyone's perception of the world around us is different. So things are not how I perceive them to be, and how someone else perceives the world around to be will be completely different. And that when these two perceptions don't match, that's how conflict can arise. All right, so the scientists in the video were talking about perception from a scientific perspective. But as I've just shared, with the language I've just shared and used with you guys, you can tell that perception is also something that has been dealt with from a Buddhist perspective, all right? The video also talked about memory and how our brain uses patterns to remember things, and it fills in the blanks. And it does this to make our navigation of the world around us, make our navigation of phenomena around us more efficient and quicker. All right, so good morning, Celeste. Good morning, Jacinta. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. So this video, The Magic of the Unconscious Mind, also talked about memory and how our brain uses patterns and previous patterns to remember things and to fill in the blanks around us, so that how we move through the world is way more efficient, because we don't have to keep processing new information. But as a result of this, it means that our memory is not perfect. All right, so again, that's another topic that has been dealt with in Buddhism, but in this video that Rinpoche showed us and that Rinpoche instructed us to watch every single month, it was dealt with in a very scientific way. All right, so studying and learning, not just from strictly Buddhist texts, will be very helpful in informing us in how we can adjust the attitude in the right direction. All right. The other method that Rinpoche also recommended, so sorry, I haven't been feeling well. Sore throat. And the other method that Rinpoche also recommended to us for how we can adjust our attitude to deal with something, either as an obstacle or not, is by meditation. So meditate on where and how obstacles arise. All right. When you meditate on this, you will realize that when something arises, when an obstacle arises, it's our karma coming to fruition. So when you understand and when you've internalized and you realize that obstacles are our karma coming to fruition, instead of getting frustrated, instead of becoming overwhelmed by a sense of failure, thinking that, this obstacle is the final answer and we've tried so hard and we're never going to move past it, we're never going to get what we want. Instead of thinking about it that way, we think about the knowledge that we can meditate and think about the knowledge that we've been equipped with to purify karma. You see, for most of us, our reaction when we meet obstacles is a split second of panic, thinking, oh my God, how am I ever going to deal with this? Or, oh my God, this is so difficult. Oh my God, why did this have to come up? And so on. When you meditate on why obstacles arise, and that becomes something that is habitual. When an obstacle arises, your attitude shifts from being, oh my God, panic, to, oh, it's arisen because of my karma, so I'm just going to deal with it. I'm going to deal with it using the knowledge that I've been given, using the tools that I've been taught on how to purify karma. All right, so it's a much more practical approach as opposed to just, oh my God, what am I going to do? The other thing also, geez, Facebook is so buggy today. The feed keeps pausing. I don't know if it's actually me or what's going on. But anyway, the other thing that Rinpoche also taught us to meditate on is impermanence. Why does meditating on impermanence help us to deal with obstacles? Because everything that we experience has a cause. Which means that if there's a cause for the obstacle to arise, once the cause is addressed, then the obstacle will no longer remain. So there is a beginning and an end to everything. So people think that when you meditate on impermanence, it's a very morbid thing to do, it's very depressing, that all good things must come to an end. But if you think about it in a different way, it's not just that all good things must come to an end, but it's also that all difficult things must come to an end too. Right? So thinking that there is a way, beyond the difficult situation that we're experiencing now, or beyond the obstacle attitude that we're experiencing now, laziness, jealousy, and so on, that there is a way, there is a cessation to it. When we meditate on impermanence more and more and more, thinking that there is an end to an obstacle, obstacles become more manageable and they become less overwhelming because we know and we've internalized the law of causation. And so our reaction to that is less anxiety, less anger, and less frustration, and so on. All right. Finally, meditating on what is our priority, what is our end goal, what is it that we ultimately want out of life. And when you meditate on that, think, are our actions and are our decisions aligned in that direction, or do they take us away from it? Why is meditating in this way useful? Meditating in this way is useful because it breaks the pattern that we have of panic-induced thinking. Like I mentioned, the initial reaction, the instant reaction of thinking, oh my God, how am I going to deal with this? And then reacting and then making decisions from that state of mind. All right, so when we think, what is our priority? Is this event an obstacle to my priority? It helps us to deal with it. So if there's an obstacle to the thing that you want, is the obstacle worth it? If you don't really want that thing, then the obstacle is no big deal. So panic comes down because, well, if I don't get that thing if I don't get that thing, since I don't really want that thing, the obstacle is not such a big deal. If you really want it, then thinking, well, is the end goal a priority for me? When we break that pattern of panic-induced thinking, it gives us a chance to refocus on the goal and gives us an opportunity to think of a way to work around the obstacle because we're not reacting from panic again. All right. So if you really want something, if something is really your priority, no matter what obstacles appear, no matter what obstacles arise, you will put up with it and you will tolerate a lot more. All right. You will be less apt and less quick to give up. You will push a lot more and you will think a lot more. You put a lot more effort into it. How Rinpoche trained us in doing that was by saying no. So let's say we were in a meeting and there was there was a issue in front of us and that we had to deal with, Rinpoche would discuss with us. And as we were discussing with Rinpoche would often say, no, that's not a good idea, tell us why it's not a good idea, and then, sometimes manifest a little bit more wrath. Why? Because Rinpoche is actually presenting us with an obstacle to get us to put our ego down, to get us to look beyond the hurt of, oh, I've been rejected, or I was called stupid, or my idea was called stupid, and so on, and to focus on the end goal that we really, really want, focus on our priority, and continue to push through and to think of a way around it, all right? So it's a case of identifying and recognizing our priorities and being willing to put in the work towards achieving those priorities. So, for example, do we want attainments? Or do we want worldly success? Now, it's important for us to be honest with ourselves when we ask this question, what is it that we really want? And it's important for us to be honest without judging ourselves about whether something is good or bad. So what is it that you really want? What is it that you honestly really want spiritual attainments? Or be honest with yourself, is it that you really want worldly success? Meditate and find the answer for yourself, and you don't need to tell anyone else. You don't need to post it in the comment section of this live stream. That's an answer that you need to give for yourself. That's an answer you need to figure out for yourself. All right? It sounds good for us to say that we want attainments and we want spiritual attainments, but when we're honest with ourselves, is worldly success ultimately what is the most important to us? Keep on meditating on it as time goes on, because our answers will change. And over time, watch how your answers change. As you spend more time in the Dharma, is your answer, your honest answer, more frequently, I want spiritual success, I want spiritual success, I want spiritual success? Or is your answer swaying? So sometimes it's spiritual success, sometimes it's secular. Or is your answer starting to veer off more towards spiritual success? The reason why meditating on our priorities, whether it's spiritual success or secular success, more important, is because it tells us how much more we're willing to put up for what is our priority or what is our goal. If you spend more time in the Dharma or in a Dharma environment, but your answer to that question starts to become more towards secular, then you need to see what adjustments can be made to your practice to start to nudge the priority back towards spiritual attainments. If your answer is more towards spiritual attainments, then you can start to nudge your practice towards quickening or quickening how quickly we can get those attainments that we want. All right. When we know more and more Dharma, you will find that our answer to this meditation changes less and less and less. It becomes more consistent, more stable over time. And the thing is, the other reason why meditating on what our priority is so important is because we may actually realize that perhaps what we want isn't necessarily always ultimately what is best for us. And that is why we rely on a guru. Now, the guru is the one who's brave enough to actually tell us what is good for us. And sometimes what the guru tells us does not always match what we think is good for us, all right? And what it is that we desire. And so in those moments, in those instances, in those situations, then doubt arises. Is my teacher actually the teacher for me? Wrong view may arise. Maybe my teacher doesn't really know what's going on. Or even conflict arises. So, no, you know what you're telling me isn't the truth. You don't really know what I want. All right. So, but the teacher is actually the one who's brave enough to tell us what is good for us. Rinpoche told us that a real guru will always tell us things that we don't like to hear, because a real guru isn't about boosting our ego. A real guru isn't about accumulating followers. A real guru isn't about accumulating wealth. A real guru will always tell us things that are good for us, that are beneficial to us on an ultimate level for our spiritual practice, for our spiritual ascension or spiritual progress. A real guru will never tell us to make him rich. He will never tell us to accumulate as large a following as possible. It's not about that, all right? So a real guru, what Rinpoche explains, is that a real guru fights against our samsara. He fights against or she fights against our desires, fights against our anger, our hatred, our jealousy, our laziness, our frustration, our anxieties, our ego. That is what a real guru fights against. And so sometimes, in order to do that, in order to be with us to do that, a real guru has to tell us all of the things that we don't necessarily want to hear, but it's actually good for us. All right? So if we keep thinking that our guru is against us, because our guru keeps telling us everything that we want to do isn't good for us, so a real guru will tell us to renounce, a real guru will tell us to develop bodhicitta, a real guru will tell us to be kind to others, to be kind to animals, to be compassionate. A real guru will tell us to develop wisdom. If you keep fighting against a teacher who tells you to do all of those things, what's the point of having a guru at all? That's what Rinpoche always said, right? Once you've taken a teacher, why bother and continue to keep fighting against the teacher? Why bother to continue to keep challenging the instructions of the teacher, to keep giving up on the commitments that the teacher has given you, to keep giving up on the spiritual practices that a teacher has given you, all right? If we think that our guru is against us, then we got off on the wrong footing. Because, like I said, the guru will always tell us that what it is that we desire and what it is that we want may not necessarily be the best thing for us on an ultimate level. All right, so if we think that our teacher's fighting us, our teacher's against us, why is it that, my teacher always tells me that all the things I want to do are bad? Why is it that my teacher's always stopping me from doing all of these things? Why is it that my teacher's always telling me that, this will lead to karma and so on, and, it's all bad? When you think like that, you've got off on the wrong footing with your teacher, because in reality, our guru is our friend, who helps us to battle and who helps us to overcome our spiritual obstacles of desire, our spiritual obstacles of laziness, our spiritual obstacles of anger, of mental wandering and agitation, of being distracted and so on. All right, our teacher is there with us, and just like how our parents are there with us, sometimes when you are a kid, your parents tell you things that you don't necessarily want to hear, and at the moment in time you don't actually know why it's good for you, and so as a result of not knowing why it's good for you, you fight with your parents. Then you get into your rebellious teenagers. For example, when I was 14, 15, I wasn't allowed to cross the road on my own. Opposite my school there was a cafe, and after school all of the kids would go across to the cafe and they would order fried macaroni. See, I still remember. They would order fried macaroni. I wasn't allowed to go because it involved crossing a road, and I got into a lot of conflict with my parents over that. And I remember arguing with my mother, thinking, I'm 14, like, come on, why can't I just cross the road? It's literally a 2-lane road, it's not even a highway. Why can't I just go across the road and go to the cafe and hang out with my friends? Because it was so lame that when my friends are going, oh, Gina, do you want to come with us? I'll be like, no, I can't. Like, oh, why can't you come? Like, like your ride isn't here yet, you don't have to go home yet, come with us. I'd be like, no, I can't, because I'm not allowed to cross the road at 14. I was like, oh my God, that's so lame, why can't I go? It didn't sound like it was a good thing for me. It sounded like I was in conflict with my parents over it. Until one day, my parents explained that the reason why I'm not allowed to cross the road on my own at 14 is because although my parents trust me, they don't trust drivers. So they don't trust that there won't be a driver who is careless or irresponsible in a school zone who will knock into me, drive into me. So that was their reason for it. I didn't understand it at the time, but that was their reasoning. But it's like that in a student-teacher relationship. Is sometimes our teacher will tell us things that outwardly seem unpleasant to us, outwardly seem like an obstacle to what it is that we want to accomplish, or what it is that we want, what it is that we desire. But a real teacher will always tell us things that further our spiritual practice. All right? And it may not necessarily be things that we want to hear, but will be something that is good for us. Now, the final thing that I want to bring up today about how we can deal with obstacles is about Dharma protective practice and about purification practices. Because many of us are under the impression that if we engage in Dharma protected practice or purification practices, that we will suddenly be showered with all the riches in the world. And we will get everything that we want, and we will be living in ultimate luxury and so on. All right? I'm going to tell you now that that is not necessarily the case. So I'm so sorry to burst your bubble. Because, we hear all of these stories about people going to the Genzei chapel at Kechara Forest Retreat and, like asking for help with like 4D or lottery or whatever, and they're always winning. But somehow, when the rest of us, go for it and try and do the same thing, we never win. All right, so I'm here to tell you that Dharma protected practices and purification practices will not necessarily shower us and bathe us in the wealth of the world, and we will not suddenly become billionaires overnight. All right, and that if you pray, you will not necessarily be granted every single thing that you want. Why? Okay, so how is it that we actually come into Dharma protected practices or purification practices? We are introduced to those type of practices through the kindness of our teacher. And it's our guru who actually introduces us to Dharma protected practices and purification practices to purify the karma that then manifests as obstacles for us. Now, will Dharma protected practice get us everything that we want? Keyword here being want, all right? And the answer to that, sorry to burst your bubble, is no. Why? Because what we want is not always necessarily helpful to our spirituality. The answer to the question is in the name itself. So what is it that a Dharma protector does? A Dharma protector protects the Dharma. Alright? So that's your answer. What does he protect? He protects the Dharma. He is not our magic wishing well, where if we do circum and offer sang, that suddenly we will win the lottery overnight. He is not our wishing well that, our bank account suddenly grows by triple digits overnight, all right? A Dharma protector protects the Dharma in general, but he also protects the Dharma, our Dharma, or the Dharma that's in us specifically. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is he protects our spirituality. So for example, this is a common one. A lot of people will pray to the Dharma protector, whether it's Dodishukden or they will pray to Satrap or whoever. They'll pray for wealth, they'll pray for money, thinking that if they keep praying to him, he will grant them all the riches in the world. That's a misconception because it's not always necessarily the case. Why? Because as I shared before, money can actually be an obstacle. So in some cases, you guys may not like to hear this, but in some cases, the Dharma protector may actually hold off wealth, because if we were to get it, then that wealth would become an obstacle and will become a distraction to us, right? So in the same way that, because I've actually seen this before, I've seen people who pray for years and years and years and years and years, because they're in deep financial distress. They've got a lot of financial obstacles, and all they can think of is that. So they keep praying for it. But the thing is, as they pray for it, it means that they've spent 5 years, 6 years or whatever doing Doji Shukden sadhana every single night, or doing Satrap sadhana every single night, or Pandin Lama every single night. So that's 5 years of them accumulating merit every single night by making offerings to the 3 jewels every single night. But at the same time, the financial situation never seems to improve. Why? Because the second they got a little bit more money was when they got distracted, was when they started to drift away, was when they started to drift back towards their self-gratification lifestyle. So Rinpoche actually told us, actually, for certain people, wealth can be an obstacle. And so what the Dharma protector will do will be that he may actually hold off the wealth coming to give people time to accumulate more merit, because he knows, the Dharma protector knows, that once the wealth comes, that they'll get distracted and then they'll start to be less reliant, or they'll start to be less committed, and then they will have few opportunities to create merit. And so the Dharma protector in that way was actually protecting the person's spirituality, or protecting the person's Dharma practice by giving them more time to accumulate more merit. Alright, so whilst having no money can be an obstacle, having money can also be an obstacle, all right? So we need to make sure that we are financially settled. Let me see how much more time we have. Oh gosh, just running over. Okay, so we need to see how much more time. We need to make sure that financially we are settled and we're not distracted by it. And so, if having no money is an obstacle, the Dharma Protector may give us something. He may give us just enough so that we're settled, so that we're not distracted, so that we can continue with our spiritual practice. Simultaneously, if having wealth, if having resources means that we can donate more to the Dharma, if that is our real motivation, if that's our genuine, honest, sincere motivation when we pray, then financial resources will come to us very quickly. Or maybe the Dharma Protector knows that for some people, the most that they will ever do in this life is to donate. And so he helps them, he gives them the financial resources so that they can continue to create and to make a stronger connection with the Dharma. So, like I mentioned earlier, wealth or any situation, any incident does not change, but how our attitude and our motivation and how our approach to it will change how we view something as an obstacle or not, and will change, or even in this case, influence whether a Dharma Protector or whether our purification practices are successful or not. All right. So before I go, let me quickly see if there are questions, because it's a little disjointed today, I know. Oh, good morning, Nancy. Thank you for joining us, and good morning, Limman. Thank you for joining us today. All right, Iman. Sorry, I look here as though the camera is here. Iman, I see your questions. I will answer as soon as the live stream is over, because we are a little bit out of time already. Talked way too much this morning. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, just like Iman does, please leave a comment in the live stream, and then I will get back to you as soon as the video is over. Before I go, very quickly, I just want to ask you guys to reflect on the past week. Did something come up that led to a moment, an instant of panic that we thought, oh my God, how am I ever going to be able to get past this? Whether it was an obstacle in, let's say you wanted to come to KFR and your children were like, I don't know, like putting up a fight because they don't want to, spend their day in the temple. Or was it that at work, you're trying to complete a project, or you're trying to close a deal, negotiate a deal, but the client came back to you with more questions? Or was it that you were at school and you're trying to be friends with someone, or you're trying to talk to your crush, and then another girl or another boy comes in and intercepts you? All right, so have there been moments in your past week when you have come up with an obstacle? Even moments when you thought, I spent all day doing Dharma work already. I've been volunteering with the Stupa project. I think I can skip my sadhana today. No, you can't. And I'll explain why in another video. So have there been moments when you felt lazy to engage in your daily spiritual commitments? Have there been moments when in the course of doing Dharma work you thought, why like that? Or have there been moments when you've been engaging in your Dharma work and frustration or irritation or anger arose in you? All right, so think about those times and think about how you could have dealt differently with those times and with those moments, whether breaking, and how you could have broken the pattern of panic-induced thinking in order to deal with that situation in a more effective and efficient manner. And then as we move into the new week, think about how you're going to stop, take a deep breath, and then approach any obstacles that arise. How are you going to overcome it when they arise? Will you face in this week the same obstacles that you faced last week? Do you have a chance this week to overcome the obstacles that you experienced last week? Is that boy or girl that you're still interested in still being intercepted by somebody else? How are you going to work around it? How are you going to close that deal, that very, very important deal with the client? Maybe you might want to pray to the Dharma Protector to purify, to clear obstacles in order to close the deal. All right? But think, how in this week will you be able to overcome the obstacles that you've experienced in the previous week? Very quickly, before I go, I just want to remind you guys again that the live stream for the Sungrup puja to bless and consecrate the items which are going into the Semrimchi Indoor Relic Stupa will be today at 7 p.m. Malaysian time, so GMT +8, and that will be on the new Relic Stupa Facebook group. Alright, if you guys want the link to that, it's available on the Kechara Facebook fan page as well as the Semrimchi Facebook fan page. The live stream starts at 6 p.m. The puja is actually at 7 p.m. but the live stream starts at 6 p.m. It will be in English and Chinese, so that you guys will be able to see everything that will be going into the stupa and all of the preparations that will be taking place around the stupa. Alright, it is a Zoom call, as I said earlier, so there is a limit to the number of participants who can hop onto the call. So if you want to be included and you want to actually be in the call, please go and click the link and join the meeting as soon as possible, as soon as this live stream ends, alright, so that you don't miss out. So that's happening today at 6 p.m. Malaysian time, and then there will also be the Doji Shukden Sadhana at 10 p.m. on the Chinese Kechara Facebook fan page, and then on Tuesday at 9:30 there will be Easy Dharma for the New Normal by Pastor David on the Wheel of Sharp Weapons, either verse 103 or 104, I forget. And then on Thursday at 8 p.m. on the Kechara and Friends Facebook group, there will also be the live stream of the Semrimchi Swift Return Puja. Alright, so you guys will be able to follow along, follow us and follow along with that, because the texts are available online. Alright, thank you guys so much for joining me today. I'm so sorry that I've completely run out of time. But as I said, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section of this video. Iman, I'll get back to you. Alright, and if you have any requests for prayers or offerings to be made, please also let me know. And don't forget to do your dedications. Don't forget to send in cash notes or bills or whatever. It needs to have your energy on it, alright? So don't bank transfer anything, don't PayPal anything, don't Venmo anything. It needs to have your energy on it. So if you have any coins or any banknotes that you want to have included inside the indoor relic stupa, please send it to us as quickly as possible by 27th August, alright? So those are your reminders for today. Once again, thank you so much to the sponsors who made today's talk possible. Your support helps us to continue to make all of these online sharings and online programs available for everyone. Alright, so thank you so much, and if you would like to donate, there is a link in the description section of this video. I'm going to head off now. I'll see you guys same time, same place next week on a topic that I have yet to decide. Alright, so thank you guys for joining me this morning, and I'll see you this evening. Bye.